Hey guys, good evening to you. I hope you had the chance to enjoy this absolutely beautiful March day. So we are going to continue reading Chapter 8, The Party Choc. In a ramshackle hut beside the zoo entrance, a security guard eyed Willie's little chocolate box with suspicion. What is it? He said. A gift from zoo management, Noodle said with enthusiasm, in recognition of your years of service. The security guard lifted it, going crosses as he tried to focus on the tiny packaged chocolate. I've only been here a year. Noodles shifted awkwardly, which is why there's only one small chocolate. Oh, that does make sense, he said. It does, Noodles said proudly. Well, thank you very much, he said, and with that, he closed the door. Noodle darted back to the nearby bush where Willie was crouched, waited. Good work, Willie whispered. Now we wait. What does it do? Noodle asked, craning her neck to see through the hut's window. Is it a flying one? No, no flying this time, Willie beamed. I can't wait for you to see it. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Willie added, Of course, it is just a prototype, and I've never tried it before, so I can't guarantee that even I know what is about to happen. Noodle put her head in her hands. It's called the Party Choc, Willie said, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. Noodle shot him a look. What does it do? Suddenly, there was a bang from inside the hut, and the security guard leaped to his feet. It recreates the perfect party food and drink and a dash of entertainment. The security guard immediately started running in impossibly fast circles. It's possible that I haven't quite got the measurements right yet, Willie mumbled. He started running about with his friends. Oh, look, now he's munching through an entire platter of party food. He'll be tasting all the flavors, filling up on cream puffs and little gummy sweets and licorice and smoke, Noodle cried. Indeed, steam was coming from the man's feet now and filling the security lodge. Willie inched forward, ready to intervene, but all of a sudden, the man slumped into his chair and began making a slurping sound like this. Now he's having a nice fizzy drink, and then it's on to the birthday cake. Look, I think he's getting sleepy, Noodle said excitedly. I'm sure. I added another layer. Willie mused just as the security guard leaped to his feet and started bouncing impossibly high, right to the ceiling and back down again. The bouncy castle, Willie said. No party is complete without one. Noodle looked impatiently at her watch. Then came the crying bitch sousing with, He's feeling the big feelings now because he doesn't want to leave the party, Willie said during doing a sad look. Noodle shot him an exasperated look. And finally, he said, rising expectantly to his feet, there was a muffled thud. Bedtime. Noodle's eyes grew wide. You mean partied out, Willie said with a satisfied nod. Willie and Noodle made their way through the zoo, shining torches to illuminate the path. They passed a lake filled with flamingos. Why don't they fly away? Noodle mused. I don't know, Willie said. Perhaps they haven't thought of it. A sign for drafts pointed them in the direction of the tallest building in the place, and once inside, they slipped down a corridor lined with feeding buckets and straw and a special doors for the zookeeper to access the enclosure. Willie inspected each door sign, carefully looking for the one marked draft. Where are we? Draft. Ah! He exclaimed, wrenching the door open with confidence. Willie! Noodles screamed. That door is marked Tiger! Willie couldn't see a thing in the darkness beyond the door, but he could suddenly feel a hot breath, the brush of a whisker. Noodles slammed the door closed. You have got to learn how to read. Why? Willie asked. You were nearly eaten by a tiger. Willie raised a finger pointedly in the air. Nearly is the key word there. I've nearly been eaten by a lot of things. None of them got more than a nibble. Draft, she said, tapping a sign on the next door and then opening it. Inside a draft loomed large, all spindly legs and knobby knees. Its long neck catapulted its head towards them like a crane swinging cargo into a dock. It fixed its eyes on Noodle. Noodle gulped. Its eyelashes were batted fast as if it didn't believe what it was seeing. Willie doffed his hat and grinned. Good evening. A little late for visitors. I know, Mrs. Noodle read the sign. Abigail, she said shakily. She's called Abigail. Well, the draft didn't like that. It threw its head back and reared up through the underside of its hooves. Its nostrils flared and snorted a warning. Noodle bolted backward and panted, slipping and sliding, and landed with a squelch on the muddy floor before she could reach the door. As she desperately tried to struggle to her feet, Willie waved his hand at the draft and said urgently, Whoa there! Easy now. He turned to Noodle. And you too. The draft won't hurt you. Then he reached into his pockets and pulled out a small, knobbly green sweet. What's that? Noodle asked. Willie held it closer to the draft. The animal started sniffing and instantly he dropped back on four hooves and became all friendly, nudging Willie and nibbling at his hat. It's an Acadia mint, Willie explained as the draft pinched one from his palm and chewed on it. He slowly reached a hand up and began scratching his ear. There we are, he said soothingly. Noodle inched closer, her eyes wide with wonder. Drafts are just crazy about my Acadia mint, see, Willie said, gesturing for Noodle to join him. Loved him more than anything else, except being scratched behind the ears, of course. The draft raised his head and gave Noodle's face a huge lick. It's ticklish, she squealed in delight. Now, Mrs. Abigail, Willie said, we have a favor to ask of you. If my colleague here scratches your ears, could you possibly spare us a pie or two of milk? Only seconds later, Willie would sit on a stool milking the draft, while high above him, Noodle wobbled at the top of a rickety ladder, scratching the animal's ear, just as promised. Have you done this before? Noodle asked, beaming at the magic of it all. Oh, yes, Willie said. Without the draft milk, my draft milk macarons wouldn't be much shorter. Willie snorted and shook her. Excuse me. Noodle snorted and shook her head. Sure can be silly, Willie. I suppose that's true, Noodle. True, Noodle laughed. That doesn't work, does it, Willie mused. But nothing rhymes with Noodle. Where'd you get that name anyway? Noodle tensed. Doesn't matter. It does, Willie said. Go on. But Noodle didn't say a word. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, Willie said, if it's a secret. There was silence for a moment. But when Willie looked up again, he saw Noodle had stopped scratching the draft's ear and was sick cradling her necklace with both hands. It's all I have from my parents, she said quietly. She climbed down and handed the necklace carefully to Willie. He turned it over in his hand, inspecting it closely. An amber and gold ring hung from the chain, and something was engraved on it. It's an N, she said quietly. N for Noodle, or Nora, or Nina, or nothing at all. Can you trace the owner, Willie asked. You don't think I've tried, Noodle said. I've been to every jewelry shop in the city. For years I hope I would find him. But now I know I never will. Willie pushed the milking stool to the side and stood up. Don't say that, Noodle. You know, I used to dream that when I found them, they lived in this beautiful old house full of books for me to read. And my mom would be there waiting for me at the door, and I'd run into her arms, and I'd finally feel like I was home. And the hug would feel like it could last forever. But it actually would, because once I knew what that hug felt, I could hold on to it forever. A lump formed in Willie's throat as he remembered his own mother's big, tight hugs. He could still feel her warmth and the chocolate smell of her apron. How she'd rest her chin on his head and squeeze so tightly. But then I realized it was just a stupid dream, Noodle said. And she shook her head as if it were shaking all the dreams out of her. So, right, that's the whole sad story. Now let's get back to the milking. You must never let anyone or anything steal a dream like that away from you, Willie said seriously. There's nothing stupid about it. Isn't there? Noodle said. My parents put me down a laundry chute and never came back. Fact is, they didn't want me. That's all there is to it. I know things haven't been easy for you, Noodle, Willie said gently, but they're going to get better. I'm not going to let you rot in that wash house forever. Noodle looked at Willie, her eyes searching for a reason to believe him. You promise? She choked. I can do better than that, Willie said, standing tall. I pinky promise. He held out his hand, and they hooked pinkies. And that's the most solemn vow there is, he whispered. Noodle quickly wiped a tear away and beamed at him. Now get scratching, he said as Noodle began to climb back up the ladder. We don't have long until the guard comes to doodle, Noodle. Toodle. That still doesn't work, Noodle said, giggling. Willie smiled. Doesn't it? Does it? I'm working on it. Huh, and we are finished. Now get a dance to celebrate. Noodle shook her head, so Willie started dancing, leaping from foot to foot and waving his arms. He spun the ladder, and Noodle clung on for dear life, but then, taken with the moment, and swept up into the magic of Willie's infectious enthusiasm, she launched herself into the air and landed on the muddy ground with a squelch. Together, Willie and Noodle danced out of the enclosure, spinning through the zoo past pandas and polar bears, penguins, and puffins. They shimmed down the snake section and twirled past the tigers. Willie grabbed a huge bouquet of balloons from a stall, and the sheer size of it was enough to lift them high in the air. Their dancing feet skimmed over the still water of the lake, and the flamingos craned their necks to watch. Then, as if the idea had just come to them, the birds flapped their wings and rose up, engulfing Willie and Noodle in a flurry of pink feathers. He could just make out Noodle's amazed expression between the constant slaps of winds to the face. Snow began to fall all around them, but though it was freezing, Willie felt so gloriously warm. Across town they all flew, Noodle and Willie and the entire zoo of flamingos, dancing over the cathedral's rooftop and all the way past the domes of the gallery's gourmet before touching down by the fountain in the town square. The air was still, aside from the huge flock of flamingos who were really flapping up there, and the town was fast asleep. Willie and Noodle looked at each other, their faces full of mischief, and then they tore off around the square, galloping around the fountain, singing and dancing and shrieking with laughter. But not everyone was sleeping. A certain officer affable was making his rounds at the far side of the square. He caught sight of Willie over by the fountain and raced to the nearby payphone. Chief, you know that fellow you wanted a word with? I think I found him. Eula skipped around and around and started laughing while Willie cheered. Suddenly a whistle sounded. Sorry, I can't whistle. And drooling a little too. Willie looked up to see the chief marching into the square, coming by Officer Affable. Mr. Wonka? The chief bellowed, making even Affable jump. A word in private, if I may. You best get out of here, Willie said to Noodle, nudging her away. But, Noodle began, don't worry, Noodle, he said. I've talked my way out of tighter spots than this. I'll meet you back at the cart. We can't have the milk confiscated now, can we? Noodle looked down at the bottles of milk in her hand and knew Willie was right about that. She gave him a doubtful nod before charging off down the street. Willie stood shivering, hands in his pockets, as he waited for the officers to crunch their way around the fountain. The wind was picking up and it was bitterly cold. It felt like blades on his cheek. You be on your way, Affable, the chief said gruffly as they reached Willie. Officer Affable paused. Are you sure, sir? This is between me and Mr. Wonka. Officer Affable hesitated. Affable, the chief bellowed, leave us. With that, the officer turned on his heel and swiftly headed back the way he had just come. Willie eyed the chief expectantly, but the man didn't say anything. Instead, he waited, watching, until Officer Affable had got in his car and driven out of sight. But even once he was gone, the chief didn't move. He just stood there, fidgeting, sighing, as if gearing himself up for something. Now, this is about Abigail, Willie started as soon as they were alone. But before he could finish, the chief grabbed him by the collar, dragged him through the snow, and shoved his face into the fountain. Willie's nose broke through the ice, and his ears filled with freezing, gurgling water. He gasped and heaved with the fright of it. But though he wriggled with all his might, the chief's iron grip held him up. I've got a message for you, pal, came the chief's royal voice. Don't sell chocolate in this town. And then he pulled Willie back out. Got it? He said with a hopeful state. Willie spluttered. Not really, I'm afraid. Oh, you got a mouth, huh? I said. The chief grabbed him again and pushed him back up. Don't sell chocolate. He wrenched him out again, and this time Willie's legs seized up from the cold and gave way. He landed in a heap and said, no, I don't have my mouth on me. Well, I do have a mouth. He was desperately trying to catch his breath. But I was underwater, so I couldn't hear what you said. Oh, yeah, the chief said, helping Willie to his feet. I'm sorry I'm all out of whack. He lowered his voice to a whisper. The chocolate is making me do it. Truth is, I don't really want to be here. Willie clutched his head. It felt so painfully numb that he could barely think. Neither do I, he said. I don't think I want to be here anymore either. The chief's face brightened. There you go, then. We got that in common. But I gotta give you a message. Sell chocolate again in this town, and you're gonna get more than a bonk on the head. I haven't had a bonk on the head, Willie pointed out. Oh, the chief said. What is wrong with me? Would you mind please removing your hat? Chapter 9 The Green Ledger. Back at Scrubbit and Bleacher, Noodle pushed the car containing Willie back into the wash house, right under Mrs. Scrubbit's nose. Oh, my head, Willie grunted as she made her way to the laundry chute. Keep it down back there, Noodle hissed. But it didn't matter. Mrs. Scrubbit was too busy staring into Bleacher's eyes. Your eyes, she was saying, are like tomatoes that somebody sat on. Bleacher grinned awkwardly. I don't get to see my eyes much because they're busy doing the looking, but I'll take your word for it. Oh, you're so poetic, Mrs. Scrubbit sighed. My poetic lord. Newell heaved Willie into the laundry chute, and he slid back down to the watch house. It was like he never left. Mr. Wonka, I was cried as he arrived back with a thud. Good of you to join us. Not late, am I? Willie asked. Abacus inspected his watch. No, cut it a bit fine. Why are you soaking wet? Piper asked suspiciously. We're for a dip in the fountain, Willie said as he made his way to his section. Tiddles been pulling his weight. As a matter of fact, Tiddles is a marble, Abacus said. Productivity is up 30%. We took the afternoon off, Larry chimed in. But that's not the point, Abacus said. This is the point, Larry said, pointing and nodding at his own finger. Not now with the jokes, Larry, Abacus said wearily. Sorry, Larry mumbled. The point is, Abacus said, where have you been, Mr. Wonka? What you been up to, Larry added. Piper sniffed the air. And why do you smell of draft? Lottie leaned in, eager to hear Willie's answer. Guess I do owe you an explanation, he said as Noodle wandered in with a mop and bucket. Truth is, I'm not giving you the full story. I'm actually a chocolate maker chasing a dream, and Noodle has been helping me. He's not just any chocolate maker, Noodle said. He's the best in the world. Oh, Noodle, you're flattering me. Willie blushed. She's right. My creations are perfect. The plan is to sell chocolate and pay off Mrs. Scrubbit. At least that was the plan until Noodle trailed off. Let me guess, Abacus said. You had a little run in with the chief of police? How did you know? Willie cried in surprise. Because that's what happens to anyone who tries to sell chocolate in this town, Piper said. Why? Noodle asked. Three reasons, Noodle, Abacus said, holding up his hand and counting them on his fingers as he listed them out. Slugworth, Ficklegruber, and Prodnose. I thought they were rivals, Noodle said. Ah, Abacus said, that's what you're meant to think. The truth is, they're working together as a sort of chocolate cartel, if you will. Willie slumped on a pile of laundry and put his head in his hand. The situation was worse than he thought. How do you know all this? He asked. Abacus sat down next to him, a guilty look washing over his face. Because I was Slugworth's accountant for 1 week. They all leaned in closer, eager to hear the tale. One morning, I got a call. Some fancy chocolatier's bookkeeper was off sick, so I was asked to fill in, Abacus said, speaking slowly so the others wouldn't miss a single detail. It seemed like a straightforward job until I realized there were two sets of books for his account, one for the authorities and one that told the truth. I discovered the real one when one night I brought the ledger I'd been working on to his office and found the place was empty. Everyone had already left for the night. I was going to leave too, but then saw another ledger on his desk. Only this one was green, and the one I'd been working on was red. Of course, I took a look at the other ledger. It was my job. If there were more accounts to go through, I didn't want to miss them. And, well, yes, Willie said, leaning closer. Abacus lowered his voice to a whisper. That's when I realized the man is a crook. Slugworth, Proudnose, and Ficklegrill have been wiring down their chocolate and stored it in a secret vault, deep beneath the casino guarded around the clock by a corrupt cleric and 500 chocolate months. Willie and Noodle gasped. I dare say no one else knows this, but their operation is wilder than anyone can imagine, Abacus said. There were dodgy invoices, receipts, and blueprints showing how they funneled chocolate from their three factories into the secret vault. They use it for bribes, blackmail, and bludgeoning the competition. The entire city is under their control. Can't we do something about the chocolate? Noodle said, looking to Willie for an answer. If he didn't have the chocolate, well, the chocolate is guarded like precious treasure, Abacus said. Even if you got past the priest in the months, the vault in which it is kept is accessed by a secret element secured by a 9-digit code that changes every day. And the code is never kept in one place. It's split between the three of them. They even possess only three of the digits, so none of them can get at the chocolate without the others. Willie and Noodle exchanged worried glances. I stayed until the dawn reading the ledger, Abacus continued. That's when I heard footsteps. It was Slugworth. I dived under the desk just in time. He took the ledger and said, Miss Bonbon, I'm taking this to the vault. Of course he was, Willie said, shaking his head. To hide it, no doubt. And that's not all, Abacus said with a gulp. When Slugworth reached the door, he stopped, and he said with more malice, than I've ever heard a person season their words with, Mr. Crunch, you're fired. Oh dear, he knew you were there, that you had seen it, Willie explained. Abacus nodded gravely. So then, of course, I went straight to the police, and I told the chief everything. When they'd already got to him, I was arrested and charged with slandering the captain of industry and hiding under a desk. I was fined every penny I had. I don't believe it, Willie said, staring off dreamily into this. I always thought hiding under a desk would get you a lengthy jail sentence. Everyone turned to look at him. Noodle was who was used to Willie's eccentrics by now, just smiled finally and said, continued Abacus. All I needed was somewhere to lay my head until I could work out how to get back home, he said sadly. I lay on a bench by the canal, and that's where Bleacher found me. That was 4 years ago. The others all moved to comfort him, huddling close, making sympathetic notes. I'm sorry, Mr. Wonka, Advocate said, but by judging that by that lump on your head, the cartel regard you as serious competition, and they've got you right where they want you. You can't afford a shop without selling chocolate, and in this town, you can't sell chocolate without a shop. Chapter 10, A Magic Trick. That night, Willie sat in his room in a cloud of chocolate, hammering and molding and throwing ingredients over his shoulder into a gloopy mixture. He was more determined than ever to share his chocolate with the world. He couldn't let some crutch stop him. More importantly, he couldn't let poor Noodle down. The mixture was soon ready, and he walked to the window, squeezed his head through the bars, and whispered, Psst, Noodle. Immediately, a light flicked on in the window next door to the left of Willie's. What is it, Willie? She said sleepily. He swung a line of rope across her. Watch out, catch. Noodle's hand shot out and caught it with ease. Good catch, Willie whispered. Then he grabbed a basket, threaded the handle through the rope, and sat it across. Now look inside, he said, craning his neck to watch Noodle. She pulled a jar of chocolates from the basket. They were so fresh and still so warm, and they steamed up the jar. She tilted it up and down, trying to see what inside. Your wages, Willie said. A lifetime supply of chocolate, remember? Noodle smiled. You didn't have to do that. Nonsense, I gave you my word. Well, thanks, she said. I got time for you, too. Then she rolled up a piece of paper and put it into the basket, sliding it back to him. For me, Willie said, the gesture catching him off guard. The basket hit his window, and then he fished out that little ripped piece of paper. There was something scrawled on it, sort of pointy with a couple of blades like the milking stool. He held it upside down, and much to the relief, he figured out what it was. It's a drawing of a glass half full. Thank you, Newell. I do feel this perfectly captures our attitude these past few days. We could barely easily have given up, but you delivered me some sluff and reminded me that I am Willy Wonka, and I. It's an A, Newell said, interrupting him. You know, the first letter of the alphabet? I'm teaching you to read. Oh, Noodle, Willie said, holding the piece of paper to his heart and hugging it. You've already given me so much. Honestly, I think I'm going to find reading impossible, but it's a nice gesture. You will learn, Noodle said firmly. I can't have my business partner being eaten by a tiger, or nearly eaten. So we're business partners? Willie asked excitedly. Noodle shrugged casually. Well, sure, but I don't know how we're going to sell chocolate. Every time the police show up, you need to disappear into thin air, like like a magician. Willie gasped and soon a great big grin was spread across the street. The magicians do a lot of stuff: cards, rabbits, and ropes, and pulleys and trapdoors, and we don't have any of those. The light in Newell next to Newell's foot tongue. As a matter of fact, you do, Piper said. What? Willie said. Willie and Newell said at once, leaning out as far as they could, so they could see her. There are trapdoors all over the city, Piper explained. They're called storm drains. I'd be happy to show you around if you cut me in on the action. Willie felt a flurry of excitement. Are you sure, Piper? You'd be a great risk. Piper rolled her eyes. Listen, one day I was at Slugworth's and saw the coffee machine, and this old drifter came by and asked me for a cup. I gave him one, and Slugworth saw me, had me fired. I ended up here. So yeah, you better believe I want to stick it to the cartel. Okay then, Willie said with a grin. Welcome to the team. Then he threw Piper a chocolate. Mm-hmm. This is some good chocolate, Piper said. For that, maybe I'll even show you the storm drain. I don't show nobody. The light flickered on in the next room, next to Piper's. Hey, came Larry's voice. If you're recruiting, you can count me in. I don't have any practical skills, but I can talk like I'm underwater. Bluggerly bubblegug, I'm underwater. Blup, blup. Willie clapped. I was transported, Larry. Really, I was. You're in. And if you need someone to handle communications, I'm your woman, came a voice in the darkness. They all froze, and there was a long pause. Lottie, Noodle finally said. I did not know she could speak, Piper cried as they all leaned out. of their windows to see if it was really Lottie. Why are you all staring at me? Lottie said. I thought you were a mime, Larry said. A very, very good mime. No, just quiet, Lottie said with a shrug. Back when I worked at the telephone exchange, I was quite the chatterbox. Since I came here, I haven't had much to shout about. That's all going to change, Willie cheered. The light in the room next to Lottie's flickered on. I'm sorry to pour cold water on all this fun, came Abacus' voice. But if Mrs. Scrubber catches you trying to escape, she'll have 5,000 sovereigns to each of your bills. So just think about that before getting involved in this harebrained scheme. But it's not harebrained, Abacus, Newell protested. And may I remind you there's a lot of work to be done in the wash house, he went on. I actually had an idea that could free up your time to join us, Willie said. Oh, come on, Abacus, Newell said, and she loved the chocolate in his direction. Willie's chocolates are incredible. Try one. Abacus caught it and popped it in his mouth. It's very kind of you, Newell, but I don't care how good his chocolates are. He froze, and his eyes widened with wonder. When do we start? Chapter 11. You never had chocolate like this. The very next day, they put their plan to action. As soon as the sun rose in the watery sky and the city square came alive with activity, Noodle was there in the middle of it, all with her cart. The others climbed out of their laundry set and assumed their position. Piper ran down the alleyway, Larry stood on watch at one end of the square, and Lottie at the other. Abacus was in charge of the pavement jar, and Noodle kept watch by Willie. He was barely recognizable in the disguise of black trousers and a white shirt. He held a serving tray as if he were a waiter, and one by one he built a little pile of chocolates on top of it. No one was paying him the slightest bit of attention, but Willie couldn't help but hop about in the snow. The freedom of being in disguise and the suspense of what was about to come was making him want to break into dance. Next to them, cart owners were organizing their wares for the day, stacking vegetables and perfume bottles and all sorts of other things. The flower store owner, however, was having a very different morning than the rest of them. Willie immediately noticed what was going on and sidled closer as a man on one knee raised a ring up to her. His cold, doughy hands wobbled and threw her unprepared for this moment. Oh, I don't know, Colin, the stall owner said. You're a lovely man and all, but I'm looking for someone to sweep me off my feet, you know. Which me off to a life of adventure. Could that be you? No, Barbara, Colin said. Barbara's face fell. Oh, that's a shame. Not with my crying lack of self confidence, I'm afraid. Colin said. Then he got up and dusted the snow off his knees. I'd best be off. But, Colin, Barbara stirred. Sorry to have wasted your time, Barbara. Taxi. He stuck out an arm to hail one, but the driver carried on as if he didn't notice him at all. The car's tires skidded through a puddle, splattering Colin in a thick coat of snow and mud. Willie moved closer and plucked a perfect macaroon from his tray. It was powdered like a draft and topped it with little ears. And with that, we will play You Never Had Chocolate Like This. All right. And of course, that was with fair use. Colin sniffed it with great suspicion. He took a cautious bite of the macaroon, and instantly he stood taller with a newfound confidence. Then he began to dance. In seconds, the crowd was upon him. Chocolate for all, Willie cheered as they waved their money at him. Suddenly, a whistle sounded. Willie turned to where Noodle was, keeping watch by the fountain. She whistled again, pointing frantically down a side street. Willie's heart sank as he saw the chief and his officers round the corner and charging towards him. Quick as a flash, Willie turned and ran down the alleyway. I've never had chocolate like this, came Colin's cries of joy behind him. Willie picked up his speed, racing fast to where Piper was waiting up ahead. She was sweating and her muscles were aching as she held up the heavy manhole cover. Your trap door, Mr. Magician, she joked as Willie slid past her and dropped down into the storm drains. He looked up to see Piper inching the cover back into place. The sound of scraping metal was soon replaced with silence as the last sliver of daylight disappeared and he was submerged into darkness. Within seconds, he could hear the thundering footsteps of the police above. They ground to a halt. You see the man about yay high, probably acting oddly and saying about chocolate, came with a muffled sound of the chief's voice. No, sounds like someone I remember seeing, Willie heard Piper reply, and it made him chuckle. He skipped off through the tunnels, the cheerful splash of his steps echoing around him. It was like a whole other world down there, deep under the ground. As the days passed, the underground passageway became like a home to him. He would skip about with jars of chocolate, tipping his hat to rats as he passed by. In fact, Willie was able to get all over town using the storm drain tunnels, and soon he was popping up everywhere. His mysterious appearances were all anyone was talking about. Everyone wanted him to magically materialize next to him. The whole city was desperate for Willie chocolates. But Willie was becoming increasingly hard to spot. Thankfully to his many disguises, one day he boarded a tramp dressed as a ticket inspector with a bossy beige hat and matching jacket. He prepared a new recipe, all singing and dancing in its ingredients. And he wanted to try the fast moving tram seemed like a sensible place because if anything went wrong, the people would be contained inside, hopefully. It was perfect. Look, I got a watch of chocolate. A lady on the tram cried with joy as Willie placed a luminous red chocolate in their palm. All the other passengers were up out of their seats, immediately shouting and squealing, It's him! They stretched their arms up, pleading for him to hand them a chocolate. Just one bite and you'll be dancing to your own tune, Willie said, and the passengers watched in amazement as the woman who had just scoffed the chocolate began to dance. She threw her arms in the air and started kicking her legs. Willie threw the contents of a jar up into the air, and everyone jumped, catching the fallen chocolates, some straight in their mouths. Soon the whole tram was singing and dancing, some sedately, others were flailing themselves around with wild abandon. One woman in particular was doing repeated high kicks and knocking everyone's hats off. Willie sat down at the back of the carriage, crossing his legs, and reclined with a satisfied sigh. He stared down the aisle at the commotion of his own making. He felt delighted with himself. The washhouse workers were always nearby. Lottie and Larry kept watch. Piper was on storm drain duty, identified the best escape route, and Abacus managed the money. Noodle's job was to help Willie hand out the chocolate. Of course, every selling days always ended up abruptly with one of the washhouse workers sounding the alarm and the chief charging in. When the tram grounded to a halt as it stopped, the chief climbed aboard. But Lottie was quick. She sounded the alarm, and with two sharp whistles, and Willie immediately raced over the Piper, raced a hat in the floor. From there, Willie dropped down and straight into an open storm drain below. He was just here, the chief roared in fury as he began throwing passengers left and right in frustration. Where did he go? The passengers carried on singing and dancing, his face turned positively purple with fury. It's fair to say the chief was more than a little baffled as to where Willie was disappearing to and exhausted with the constant hunt. On top of it all, he was having to deal with an increasingly irate cartel who were watching their chocolate sales plummet. On another day, Willie emerged from a manhole and strode into the barber shop, his hands held aloft. In each fist was a deliciously creamy eclair topped with what suspiciously looked like a real mustache. Try my eclair, sir. What's it made of? The balding customer asked. Well, chocolate, Willie said, and a single drop of Yeti sweat. A single drop of Yeti sweat? The customer cried. It doesn't sound like a lot, Willie said, but anything more than a single drop would have some dire consequences. But a Yeti? The customer screeched. In the local school playground, Willie sold Spritty sweets which launched the children skyward to impossible heights and then buoyed them back down to the ground again with all limbs intact. Willie watched as they disappeared into the clouds. The squeals of delight raining down on him, and he smiled. All across town, people were saying Willie's praises and talking about his extraordinary chocolate. And all the while, Willie skipped through the drain beneath their feet. Though it was dark and dingy and dripping with sewage, he had never felt closer to his dream. Well, during the day, the wash house workers stealthily sold chocolate. By night, Willie and Newell focused on reading. Every evening, she stood over him as he squatted on a child's school chair, his face covered with confusion. Willie was not the easiest student to teach. Soon, though, the group had so much money, the prospect of escaping the wash house was looking more and more likely. But one day, while handing out chocolates in the town square, Larry raised the alarm. The chief was charging across the square, clanging with cars and throwing people out of his way. The workers scattered, and Willie dived down an alleyway and into a storm drain. They were just here, the chief wailed. He stood there spinning in the square, his face squished in confusion. All around him, people danced with chocolate smeared mouth. The chief was just about ready to explode when something caught his eye. Something glinted by the drain. He got down on all fours, so his face was practically touching a chocolate, but not just any old chocolate. It was a Wonka chocolate. And better still, half of it was squashed in the manhole cover. Oh, so that's how you're doing it, he said, and a thin smile stretched across his face. He lowered his head and pressed an ear to the ground. The sound of footsteps made him smile and remark, "Affable, I want an officer at every storm drain in the city." "Are you sure, sir? Should we focus on all those unsolved murders?" "No, this is a priority." The chief said, "You skip off for now, Mr. Wonka." He said, "You skip off for now." Chapter 12. Gotcha. As the city slept that night, a minuscule figure scurried up to the laundry. Stealthily, they pulled a contraption from their pocket, a little metal bulb with a large hook on a wire. They raised it in the air, pulled a trigger, and quick as a flash, the hook shot through the night and hit the bars of Willie's bedroom window with a little pin. The figure pulled out the wire to check it. It was secure, and then began to climb. When they got to the top, the figure slipped through the bars with ease and dropped down onto the floor. Tip, tap, tip, tap. They crept past Willie, who was humming a happy tune between snores as he dreamed of chocolate rivers and chocolate trees. The tiny figure scurried to the far side of the room and came to a stop next to a jar of chocolates on the floor. He stepped out from the shadows, revealing a flash of green hair, raised their arms greedily, took another careful step forward, and snap! The floorboard shot up, hitting the figure in the face, and sent him hurriedly across the room. They hit the wall, then dropped down into a masterfully placed funnel, which in turn fell into a glass jar. As soon as it landed, the jar's slit lid snapped shut, trapping the figure inside. "Gotcha!" Willie whirred as he leaped out of bed and hurried over to inspect its catch. "Let me out of here," the figure shrieked. Willie practically fell over. "You can talk!" "Of course I can talk, you fool. Now let me out of here. I demand to be released." He kicked the glass angrily. "Not until I take a good look at you," Willie said, lifting the jar into his desk, flicking the light on. "The little orange man with the green hair," he said with satisfaction. "I knew I wasn't eating my own chocolate in my sleep. So you're the funny little man who's been following me." The figure puffed out its chest indignantly. "Funny little man, how dare you?" "I'm a perfectly respectable size for an Oompa Loompa." "An Oompa what now?" Willie said. "In fact, in Loompa I'm regarded as something of a romper," he boasted. "They call me Lofty, so I'll thank you not to keep gapping at me like something you found in your handkerchief. I find it uncomfortable and, frankly, rude." "I'm very sorry," Willie said. "Let me out of here," the Oompa Loompa said. "You've no right to go around bottling up innocent strangers." "Innocent?" Willie cried. "You've been stealing from me for years." The Oompa Loompa wagged a finger at him. "You started it. You stole our cocoa beans." "What are you talking about?" Willie said, his face growing worried. "I would never steal." "You mean you don't even remember?" the Oompa Loompa cried. "That's even worse." "Remember what?" Willie said. The Oompa Loompa pressed his face against the glass until his nose was completely flat, and then very gravely he said, "The night you ruined my life." "I don't remember that at all," Willie said. "Are you sure it happened? Perhaps you've mistaken me for someone else." "My job in Limpland is guarding our cocoa beans," the Oompa Loompa said with a hug. "We don't have many. It's not a great place to grow cocoa. Then one night you came along and stole them all. Willie frowned, thinking how he flipped through all his adventures in his mind. There were so many he couldn't think of any that were like that. He gasped. He recalled the little boat, the perfect island bathed in sunlight. He remembered picking the big cocoa beans. Why didn't you say something? Willie said. I would have stopped if I'd known. Well, perhaps I drifted off the open lip, said grimacing. I woke up and my friends were standing over me, and they were furious. They sent me away, disgraced, couched out in the cold. Until I pay them back, I can never return home. Look, Mr. Limpet, Willie said, if you really think years of thieving my childhood is a reasonable penalty for taking three bait, four, the open limit corrected him, then I'm sure we could come to an understanding, but I just can't hand over my entire supply, he explained. I've got other people counting on me. All right, the open limit said, his eyes shifted suspiciously. I'll tell you what, you let me out of here and we can discuss it like grown-ups. Well, that would be marvelous, Willie said. Let's do that. Just take the lid off the jar, the Oompa Loompa said slowly. Of course, Willie said. His eyes narrowed as Willie flipped the lid off and let him climb out. Thank you, the Oompa Loompa said, dusting himself off. Now, would you be so kind as to pass me that miniature frying pan? This one, Willie said, reaching over to a set of little frying pans handing from his case. The Oompa Loompa's eyes narrowed further. The heavy one. All right, Willie said, handing him the pan. Ooh, that's quite a beast, isn't it? He said, turning it over in his hand. Now come a little closer. Closer. Come on, cozy up now. Thwack. Ah! Willie screamed as a horrible ache spread across his forehead. You hit me, he cried. An accident, I'm sure, Mr. Loop. But the Oompa Loompa was too busy stomping. He stomped up and down each of Willie's fingers, making the chocolatier squeal. Then he grabbed the jar of chocolates and topped it into his wind. Then he grabbed the jar of chocolates and hopped up onto the window ledge. Oompa Loompas do not negotiate, he roared. Good day, sir. And with that, he disappeared into the night. So that was chapters 8 through 12.